Ahead of us today, you'll see a little agenda here on your table. I want to tell you, this program though won't work really well if all of you nice folks, after all the chattering you've done up until now, if you just now sit on your hands biting your tongues. This is going to only work if everyone engages and asks questions and offers comments and everything else. So please know that we want and are looking forward to this being an interactive time, not just a talking at time, because quite frankly, none of us are that smart to be talking at any of you nice folks. One quick thing though I'd like to ask you to do, if you have a cell phone, please mute it, as I did just a moment ago. If y'all heard the mamba playing, it was because my son was calling me, and I stopped it. So anyway, if we could do that, that would be great. Also, if you are on Twitter, Life Liberty Texas is the Twitter handle for this coalition. Also on the agenda, on the handouts, you will see everyone's Twitter handles on there, so you can tweet at them, questions, comments, thoughts, take pictures of us picking our noses, whatever. So you've got that there. The purpose of today's event is fairly simple. You know, the elections are over, and now it's time to really get to work. You know, I would suggest to you that one of the biggest problems in the United States is that we all focus on our government for about the 4 weeks before an election, and then we walk away.
Are
you folks don't do that. Maybe not even 4 weeks, exactly. Now, you folks get that, and there's no need to preach to the choir when it comes to engagement. What I would suggest to you is it's time now that the folks who are ready and willing and excited to engage in the governing of our state, in the governing of our cities, and our counties, and our schools. It's time for us to make sure we know how to do so effectively. Make sure we know how to communicate with our neighbors and our family members and the, one-eyed, one-legged girlfriend from high school and, whatever else. All of us to make sure we're having those communications with those folks to get them engaged with their government. Governing is where it matters most. Some of you might remember the name Martin Treptow. He was a gentleman, little over the normal age in the century ago, when he decided that the war in Europe was something that was best kept in Europe, and so he volunteered for the United States Army. Went in as a private, again, a little on the old side to be a private in the United States Army, but he was passionate about serving his country. He served with kind of the general distinction and honor of any private in any army, in any war. He died in combat, carrying messages between headquarters and the various field commanders. After his death, as they were putting together his effects to ship them back, they found his diary. In his diary, he had written in big letters on the front page, "My pledge." And he wrote, "America must win this war. Therefore, I will work, I will save, I will sacrifice, I will endure, I will fight cheerfully, as if the entire issue of the struggle depended on me." And I would suggest that kind of mantra is one that each one of us should take. That you and I should be willing to work, save, endure, sacrifice. But most importantly, I would suggest that, like Martin Treptow, we should be fighting cheerfully. We have truth on our side. We have the assurance of victory on our side. I would suggest to you that, like Martin Treptow, by fighting cheerfully, even the inconvenience of death does not interfere with our success in the fight ahead of us. The United States is too precious. The values and principles that our nation, our state, were founded on are too important to the future of mankind for us not to be willing to cheerfully engage in the policy fights ahead. We have got a fantastic lineup for you. I'm going to start off by asking John Seago, Tony McDonald, and Joanne Fleming to come on up. And I'm now going to introduce to you Morgan Williamson. She heads up communications for Empower Texans. She's the one responsible for this event. Please welcome Morgan, Joanne, Tony, and John.
Thank y'all for coming. This is an awesome turnout. I'm going to kind of let them get set up and introduce them. They're going to be talking about the kind of ins and outs and mechanics of the process, the committee process, the rules, and how we can help our elected officials hold leadership accountable. And if y'all have any questions, we're gonna have note cards that if y'all have any questions, if you wanna raise your hand or anything, one of us will come to you with a note card, and that way the question and answer can kind of flow a little better. And all right, well, I will let them take it away. Introduce yourselves.
Thank you. My name is John Seago. I serve as the Legislative Director for Texas Right to Life, and I'm happy to see a lot of friendly faces here, people who have helped us in the Capitol to pass legislation that restores justice for pregnant women, preborn children, and vulnerable patients. And our organization is the largest and oldest pro-life organization in the state, and we have the unique position of leading the pro-life legislative agenda in the Capitol. And the way that we do that is that we work with legislators and senators to do some research, to do the drafting, and then to lobby for the bills specifically. And what we're talking about this morning in this first group of panels is the hurdles for legislation. How good legislation usually is derailed. And the first one that they asked me to talk about is the committee process. And so kind of the big picture is with Texas Right to Life, what we've been doing, we've been meeting with legislators to figure out what are we going to pass next year? What are we going to try to pass in the next session? So we help the legislators do the ideas, the research, and the writing. And if you guys have questions about this process, this is more of my job, what I focus on, of the actual bills that the pro-life movement works on. So once we work with these legislators and we have a great idea, we have an absolutely solid pro-life bill that's going to save lives, protect pregnant women, protect vulnerable patients, well, it doesn't stop there. We don't just mail that bill to Governor Perry and ask him to sign it for us, although that would be convenient sometimes. What we have to do is we have to go through the legislative process. We have to go through all of these steps, and it's actually, as you'll see, a dizzying effect. Oh, that's good. I'm making you dizzy to just show you how dizzying the legislature is. There we go.
It does say committee on it.
Yeah, there we go. This is the dizzying process. Just making sure everybody's awake this morning. This is the dizzying process that all of our bills have to go to, and you see in the very middle, we finally get to the governor's desk, but it is a long road, and we have to go through this process of filing the bill, and then going through all of these steps to get approval, to get votes, to hear the voices of experts and citizens, and then eventually, if all the lines are aligned, or if all the stars are aligned correctly, we finally get to the governor's desk. So what I want to talk about, and what they asked me to talk about this morning, is the first major hurdle that a bill has. And thousands of bills are filed, thousands of great ideas and a lot of really, really bad ideas are filed, and then they have to go through this process. And the first big step, as you see, is the committee hearing. And so the committee process is actually the biggest cause of death for legislation. And what happens is, we see that what happens is these bills go to specific committees based on the topic. Get back to over here. And this is just in the House. These are just a few examples of the types of committees that these bills go through. And depending on the topic subject, or depending on political decisions of which bill needs to go to what committee. For example, all of our bills that deal with pregnant women, preborn children, and abortion just automatically go to state affairs, even though you would assume it would go to public health or it would go to human services. There's been a political decision to send all of these controversial, hot topic bills to state affairs. So we always go to that committee. And what happens is we have to ask for a hearing. And what we do is when we have a hearing, is in each committee, we have, for example, in public health, we'll have 11 members, BMs, a few experts come before them in a hearing and tell them whether they support or oppose the bill and make arguments for it, and this is testimony. Now, every bill has to have a public testimony, and every bill has to allow citizens to come and speak. And this is one thing that I know most of you have heard of and know, and even a lot of people here have helped us in hearings. But this is absolutely essential, because what has happened before and what happened in 2013 was that there was a piece of legislation that Texas Right to Life was opposed to. We thought that it was very dangerous for vulnerable patients, and we saw that it made a current bad law even worse. We were surprised that they could do that. And
they can always do that.
Yeah, exactly. Never underestimate. And so the first hearing that we had were the experts. We brought in our experts, and we brought in a few citizens to oppose the bill. We had it over in the Senate. Well, they didn't get the message. The message was not received. So what we had to end up doing, what we decided to do was, okay, that didn't work. They're not listening to the experts. They're not listening to the people who have actually studied this, the lawyers, the physicians, and the citizens who have seen it firsthand, or a few of the citizens who have seen it firsthand. So what we ended up having to do to kill this bill in the House is to actually turn the process into this. Well, we brought more experts, but more importantly, there was standing room only, because we could fill the room with citizens. And this is the most effective way to have a hearing, for the citizens to be heard. Now, what you usually see, and unfortunately in a hearing, is you have, 2 experts for the bill, 1 expert against the bill, and maybe 2 citizens, if you're lucky, come in and talk about their personal experience. That's just on a typical bill. And so what the legislators, what these members, these 11 members who were listening to the testimony, they're getting a very skewed perspective, a very limited perspective on this bill, and then they're going to decide whether this bill dies in their committee room or whether they vote on it and pass it and send it to the next steps of the process. So it's absolutely essential that we have the voice of citizens in this process, and that's what we did with the Senate Bill 303 in the Public Health Committee, is that we brought all of these citizens who have been affected by doctors making quality of life decisions on them, and have these citizens talk about their own illnesses and how they've heard doctors speak poorly and give them and kind of devalue their lives. And whenever we started hearing that testimony, the legislators saw this is a dangerous bill. Given the personal experience of all these citizens, and what this bill was a new tool that would be put into those hands of doctors, they said that would actually hurt all of these citizens even more, and that would put more citizens in jeopardy. So this step is absolutely crucial, is that we fill the rooms with citizens, whether it's a pro-life bill, whether it's a budget matter, whether it's the appropriations bill, whether it has to do with border security or charter schools or anything that we're interested in. They don't need to just hear the 3 experts in the middle of the room, or even 5 experts. Who are paid to come and talk to the legislatures about these things. They need you, and as a pro-life and as the pro-life organization, we need your voice as well. Now, it would be great as if this was the end of the story. It would be very nice if the committee just said, oh, wow, all these citizens are interested. Let's just send this bill straight to the governor. But that's not what happens. And what actually is the most frustrating thing about the committee process is this next step.
Sir?
Yes, sir.
I actually had one bill back in 2006 that I was trying to get passed, but it never even got to this step. It never even got on the calendar. How did you?
Okay, the calendar of the committee?
Right.
Okay, so you're right. For us to get to this point where we have the experts and we have the citizens speaking out, the chair has to schedule it for a hearing. And the legislator who's carrying the bill has to request that. And that's usually, especially with our freshmen, we have a lot of freshman representatives who are excellent individuals and have really the right agenda as far as protecting life. They would file their bill and assume the chair to do the right thing, and would assume the chair to say, oh, wow, this is an important bill. I need to put this on my calendar. Whereas to get a hearing in the first place, that author and citizens and individuals like in this room that are in the Capitol have to badger them to get it on the calendar, especially if it's a good bill. They'd have to really remind them and request the hearing, do a formal request, and usually some legislators are too slow on that, and then ask the chair for a hearing.
Yeah, John. Can I ask you real quick? My name's Tony McDonald. I'll introduce myself more formally in a moment. But what was the bill, and do you remember what committee or what kind of committee it was in front of?
It was to allow bilingual to be determined at the local level.
Okay, bilingual education and letting the schools do that, and so it probably
let
went
the
to
local school determine whether they were going to use it or not use it.
and it probably went to public education.
Yep.
Is the committee?
Yep.
Do you remember what member was carrying the bill for you?
Linda Harper Brown and Mike Shapiro was in the Senate, and
Okay. Well, some of the people are in on the joke.
Captain Woodlands,
Rob Eisler,
Rob
who's been the
Eisler.
chair. Yeah. So I was going to say a couple comments, and John touched on this. There are certain things that members have to do to get a hearing on a bill. You have to put in a request in time, and you have to submit background and purpose about what the bill, what is the bill about, what is it trying to do. You have to say, okay, I've got these witnesses lined up, and that's actually where all of you can help. If you've got a bill that you're passionate about or that you want to help with, you might actually call up the author and say, hey, I'll come and tell my story, or I'll come and testify for that bill. A lot of times they're searching for people to do that, so if they have a volunteer, they're going to be happy about that.
Yeah.
But they have to put all those things in. But then, of course, ultimately, just as the speaker has, and I will probably comment on this when Joanne talks, near tyrannical control of the House chamber, the committee chairmen have near tyrannical control of the committee process. And if you have a chairman who just doesn't want to do it, you're going to have a hard time. The real answer there is not a legislative solution or a process solution. It's a go tell their voters what they're doing solution. And so, anyway, that was my quick comment on the matter.
Yeah. So it's a great point. And sometimes what we'll see is a great bill will be filed, but the author has no intent in passing it. The author was filing it to make a Tea Party in his district happy, or he was filing it just in order to, be able to campaign on it. Well, hey, I filed that bill in the past, but they never ask in the way they kill it. Just 1 second. They never ask for a hearing, and so they file it, and it just sits there and dies, and they never actually formally ask for a hearing. And so that's one thing for us. If we see a good bill, let's interact with that, like Tony said, interact with that office. If we don't see that a hearing has been, and make sure that they actually intend on passing it. Yes, sir.
Just to emphasize that, one of the things we did with a lobbying bunch is that we interacted with some of the people that were testifying on committees, and then we had a group of people that would follow up and go to the senator's or representative's office to reinforce the issue. And we had some successes on a number of ones, but we had a similar situation where a bill was stuck in committee. We talked to the author and found out where the problem was, and then we sent emails to the Tea Party head in that county and talked to the committee chair, and it was out in 2 days.
Excellent.
We didn't get it past calendars, but we got it out of committee.
Right. And that's the next step is, so whenever you have all those members on your committee, they're the ones that are going to have to vote, and they're the ones who are going to have to push the chair to vote. So, just talking to your legislator is not always the most prudent thing to do, but talking to all of the members, say, hey, I spoke in your committee, I told my story, you seemed sympathetic towards my personal story. You know, are we going to have a vote? You know, have you heard anything from the chair? Can you ask him to have a vote? You know, lobbying and advocating those specific members on that committee as well. Yes, sir.
Yeah, John, and this may be jumping the gun, but since we're talking about committees, and since the election is over, and you're going to the 84th legislature, not just getting it through committee because the authors say it didn't really push, he was just making constituents back home happy, and Joanne probably, I know, this. But the committee chairs that are appointed by the speaker, because we're going into the 84th, and this is a big issue. I know I'm fixing to talk with a particular House representative here in Tarrant County about his non-bill. How important is it to get the right committee chairs in there, which is appointed by the speaker, if I'm not correct?
Right. Yeah, so we've run into this before where the chair was not enthusiastic about passing the bill. However, you know, a lot of the members on the committee were. And we went straight to them and asked them and told them, this bill is in your committee, and, you know, can you talk to the chair about it? Can you push? And there are certain committees that you have to get several, you know, to show that there are several members who are really interested in this bill. And so sometimes you have to go to the members of the committee to get around the chair. And sometimes you just have to, you know, raise the point that the chair is the hurdle. It's not this process. It's not this kind of, oh, that's how the Constitution is written. There's one individual who's sitting on your bill who's at the head, and that is definitely. But talking to the members of the committee before you start pointing to the chair is important, because there may be another committee member who doesn't like the bill, who wants to stop the bill, and has been just the loudest and throwing the tantrums, you know, to the chair, like, don't let this bill to the floor. And even though there's just one, that bill may die because they're the loudest ones screaming in the chair's ear, you know, in these private meetings. So there's one more question, then we got to move to the calendars committee.
Does the chair have the final call on whether it goes to?
The chair of the committee is the final authority on whether there's a hearing.
Opposed to it after all the members of the committee talk to the chair, and the chair still refuses it to have the answer bill.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay, the answer to that is, I think it's Rule 13 in the House rules, they pass it every year. If they had the guts to, which they don't, but if the Republican majority on that committee, when one of them would make a motion that bring the bill forward for this final hearing and pass it on, and then they had in the size of the state affairs, which is the worst one, and the two other members of that committee seconded it. It takes 3 seconds, depends on the number of people on the committee. And they take a vote, and the majority of the committee votes to bring that thing in for the hearing, then it has to be heard. That's never been used as far as I know, but it's there, and we need to lean on our strong Republicans to use that rule. But they all say, well, we're afraid we'll lose our committee assignment.
To comment on this, there are a number of mechanisms which have never been used in terms of forcing committees to report bills and forcing committees to set a hearing and transferring a bill from one committee to another one if that committee won't report. The unfortunate part is that all of those lead to immense delays, and delay, you know, in a 5-month session, delay is death. And so, but I agree with you, there are things to be done. What we may talk about here in a minute is one of the scary parts is that the chair doesn't have to recognize a member to make a motion.
That's the killer right
there. But that's kind of a nuclear option, and it looks very, very bad when you won't let, you know, your fellow members make a motion or speak, or you won't turn on their mic.
That's campaign literature for the next election.
It looks pretty bad. So yeah, you know, ultimately the control is with the speaker and the committee chair, but there are a lot of things you can do to if they want to really act that way, they're going to look very bad if you do it the right way.
And those tools are very rarely used, and even in this one, typically for all practical purposes, if the chair is against it and just putting his feet in, there's very little you can do as far as the rules, just because members are not going to be willing to do that. So let me get to the calendars committee real quick.
Well, can I add one quick comment? The way the rules envision is that every committee will report every bill. It'll either report it favorably or unfavorably. You know, we recommend that you pass this bill, or we don't recommend that you pass this bill, and there's a mechanism. And because with so many things, the actual practice is way outside of the way the rules work. They just kind of ignore that the bill exists if they want to kill it. And the rules don't necessarily envision that that's the way things will go.
Yeah.
So after you finally get through your topical committee that was in public health or human services or higher education or appropriations, once you finally get to that committee, then you go to this larger and more difficult committee, which is called the calendars committee. And this is just in the House. All the examples I was giving were from the House. Now, if these little committees are hurdles, like on a track, whenever you're running track, the calendars committee is Hadrian's Wall. I mean, they do not have to have public hearings. They don't have to. They have the hearings at the chair's desk on the floor whenever they're meeting in session. So you, as a citizen, are not welcome to go on the floor to hear this meeting. They have meetings, they call them at the last minute. They have meetings in the back rooms to decide. And the calendars committee does just that. They set the calendar for the House floor. So even though you filled up that room wall to wall with citizens, and even though you had experts lining out the door in favor of your bill, the calendars committee doesn't have to look at any of the evidence. The calendars committee doesn't have to explain why, but they can just hold your bill. They can just put a tag on your bill and just say this bill is not going anywhere. It's dying right here in our committee. And this is actually the most frustrating part of when your bill dies in committee. When your bill dies in a topical committee, you hear why. You hear the members say from the right, well, I just need more evidence, or are these studies peer reviewed? They always tell us that. Are these studies peer reviewed? We say, yes, we gave you a folder. You just didn't bring it to the committee room. We gave you all of these facts and everything, but we can know why they don't like our bill. Sometimes and even if it's an excuse, we at least hear an answer. Whereas in the calendars committee, nothing. You don't get anything. They don't announce. Very rarely will they tell you what's going on in the committee if you talk to the individual members. This is the most dangerous place for conservative bills. Yes, sir.
On the calendars committee, the citizens do have an input. Is that the calendars committee will allow people to come in and voice their opinion on a piece of paper for or against a bill that's in committee. So you do have the opportunity that citizens can go in there and inundate calendars committee with a specific position, which will put pressure on them somewhat.
Well, at the end of the day, they don't have to take a vote in front of you. They don't have to
go to the calendars committee office and file it directly with the office.
Mm-hmm. Practically, we've seen, especially with the pro-life bill or controversial bills, this is never effective because you have one member on there who has tagged the bill, who has said, ask the chairman, this bill I do not want to move at all. And then, once that tag expires, another member. And so there are Democrats on there who it's part of their party platform to support elective abortion. And so if there's a bill restricting abortion or trying to protect pregnant women in that area, they're going to just take turns tagging that bill and telling the chair, okay, not this one, no, not this meeting, not this meeting. They just keep delaying it. And as Tony said, delay is the most, will actually kill your bill because you get to the end of the session and your bill may have had a great start, but it stumbled in calendars committee. And we always hear about dark money, all of this dark money out there. This is the dark committee. You don't know why your bill is sitting in there. And so the calendars committee is kind of the final process, the final step in the process of getting your bill. And once the calendars committee does sign it, they set the calendar for the House floor, and then your bill can go to the House floor and be debated in public and voted on in public and actually see where your representatives are. But getting through this process is the first big hurdle for legislation, especially pro-life legislation. So we're kind of running behind. So Tony, we'll go right into your